Hey everybody, Will here from Downtime Activities, back with not a help action video, diving into a kind of mechanic in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but in a slightly less technical and a little bit more kind of story-driven way. And we're going to go over the magic items, specifically cursed magic items, and why at least the ones in the core Dungeon Master's Guide aren't really all that good, and just some ways that you can improve them for your own games. I'm not going to go over the list of sentient magic items in the DMG here, just because those fill out a gray area that is a little too complex for this video. It's worth having a discussion about, just not right now. We'll focus on the magic items in the DMG that have the curse tag to get a feel for what the D&D 5e system thinks of cursed magic items. Sitting down to work on this video, I was actually more disappointed than I expected I would be with the cursed magic items in the core DMG. Not only were the curses as bad as I was expecting, but there were hardly any of them at all. Amongst all the magic items listed, there were only 5 items with a specific curse listed. I understand that they didn't want to fill the DMG's magic item section with cursed items no one would want to use, but this is still a paltry amount. It does, however, show off items that are both the wrong way to do curses and the right way. I've put these items into 4 categories, and the items do cross over a little bit. First off, in the curses so bad they invalidate the items they're attached to category is Armor of Vulnerability. Next, in the Fail a Wisdom Save Stab 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 category is the Berserker Axe and Sword of Vengeance. The Can't Let It Go curse category is Demon Armor, Berserker Axe, and Sword of Vengeance. And in the Actually Sword of Neat category, there's Shield of Mishal Attraction and Demon Armor. Let's go over these cursed items in a little more detail, which will help to showcase what I'm talking about here. The Armor of Vulnerability is an armor set. It's considered plate, and is a rare magic item. While wearing the armor, you have resistance to one of the following damage types: bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing. The curse on this item is that attuning to the armor curses the target until targeted by the remove curse spell or similar magic, and removing the armor fails to end the curse. While cursed, you have vulnerability to 2 of the 3 damage types associated with the armor, obviously not the one to which it grants resistance. Next we have the Berserker Axe, which is a rare axe of any type. Could be a hand axe, could be a great axe. It is a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls made with the weapon, and while using it, your hit point maximum increases by 1 for each level you have attained. The curse on this item, which similarly you get just for attuning to it, means that you are unwilling to part with the axe, keeping it within reach at all times. You have disadvantage on attack rolls with any other weapon unless the target of the attack is beyond 60 feet. On top of this, whenever a hostile creature damages you while the axe is in your possession, you must succeed on a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw or go berserk. While berserk, you must use your action each round to attack the creature nearest to you with the axe. If you make an extra attack as part of the attack action, you use that extra attack as well on the same target, moving on to the next closest target when you've downed the one that you're attacking. Next we have the Demon Armor, which similarly to the Armor of Vulnerability is considered a set of plate, only this is a very rare magic item. While wearing the armor, you have a +1 bonus to AC, and you can understand and speak Abyssal. In addition, the clawed gauntlets on the armor let you do a D8 of unarmed damage with a +1 bonus to attack rolls and damage. The curse on this item, though, is once you put it on, you can't take it off, unless you're targeted by the remove curse spell or similar magic. While wearing the armor, you have disadvantage on attack rolls against demons and on saving throws against their spells and special abilities. Next, we have the Shield of Missile Attraction, which essentially does what it sounds like. This is, once again, a rare magic item. While holding the shield, you have resistance to damage from ranged weapon attacks. But its curse is that any ranged attack made at a creature within 10 feet of you targets you instead. And once again, you are cursed until targeted by the remove curse spell. Getting rid of the shield doesn't get rid of the curse. Finally, we have Sword of Vengeance, which can be any sword from a short sword to a great sword, and is uncommon. You gain a +1 bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls made with this weapon. The curse means that once you're attuned to this magic item,
you won't willingly part with it. Similar to the Berserker Axe, you keep it by your side at all times, and you have disadvantage on attack rolls made with weapons other than this one. In addition, you must succeed on a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw whenever you take damage in combat. On a failed save, you must attack the creature that damaged you until you drop to 0 hit points, or it does, or until you can't reach the creature to make a melee attack against it. Once again, though, you can't break the curse on this item simply by getting rid of it. The curse stays with you unless you use something like Remove Curse, or in this case, Banishment, which forces the vengeful spirit to leave it and leaves the sword as just a regular +1 weapon. Now, the Armor of Vulnerability here isn't interesting to me because it's a rare magic item with a truly debilitating effect. If I'm the DM, I'm going to rule that the effect that gives vulnerability to 2 types of damage is going to override all other effects that give resistance or immunity, so the players can't just bypass the curse entirely. But this invalidates the armor essentially across the board. Nobody is going to feel like the armor's benefit is worth it if they're getting such extreme drawbacks from it. Second, the items like the Berserker Axe and the Sword of Vengeance, while a little more interesting, both suffer from essentially the same curse. They're decent weapons, but if you fail that wisdom save, you don't get to choose who you attack anymore. Cursed weapons should have a little more variety to them than this, and should be more of a weighted balance as to whether or not the players want to use them. In most D&D campaigns, it would probably be easier for the players to get a hold of a statistically equivalent weapon without the downsides than to get a hold of one of these weapons, which just makes them less interesting overall. A good cursed weapon should be a balancing act for the players, offering a unique ability or benefit while also having a drawback or downside on the other. On top of this, most cursed items have the same drawback, namely you can't willingly discard them or even, in the case of demon armor, take it off at all while the curse is active. This is fine, honestly, and I understand that it's a statistical way to bring that covetousness into the system that is so common to cursed items in many stories and folklore. When every item has it, however, it starts to feel a little basic. And with a good cursed magic item, the players shouldn't want to get rid of it. It shouldn't have to be a statistical effect at all. If it's done right, the player may well develop that covetousness all on their own and be unwilling to part with the obviously cursed item. Finally, let's talk about the 2 cursed items here that I actually find interesting, the Shield of Missile Attraction and the Demon Armor. As far as just throwaway cursed magic items are concerned, cursed magic items that aren't related to the story, stuff like these should be your template. The Shield of Missile Attraction does give a benefit, that being resistance to ranged attack damage. This is not a bad effect at all, but theoretically it's being offset by the fact that any ranged attack aimed at creatures within 10 feet targets you instead. This is a downside, sure, and plenty of characters wouldn't be willing to put up with it, but some characters would. This is an excellent item for a tank trying to protect their party from archers, for example. Having a high AC and perhaps other damage mitigation abilities means you won't get hit all that often, and you'll reduce the damage you take anyway, all while protecting the people around you. The idea of a paladin purposefully taking up a cursed shield in order to reduce the risk of his allies is kind of a cool one, and it makes for a good heroic character. Then you get the demon armor. It's a good set of gear, but it makes it harder to fight against demons should they appear, and by its stats, you can never take it off unless the curse is lifted. This part of the curse is annoying more than it's truly detrimental, but the disadvantage at attacking demons is actually a cool hindrance to have to fight against. In a campaign that's mostly about fighting demons, this armor will give you a lot of trouble, but in other campaigns where it's less common, it'll hinder you less. It can also give rise to super cool moments that you wouldn't get otherwise. You finally track down the boss of the shadowy criminal organization you've been after half the campaign, and when you go to attack him, you find your armor literally fighting back against you to keep you from striking at him. It's in this moment that you realize it's not a man that you're fighting, but a demon. This is a wonderful show-don't-tell moment for the DM and a great organic reveal to the party. I think this armor doesn't have all that great of a curse, but it is interesting, and it gives rise to interesting possibilities. That's sort of the point of cursed items in D&D, or at least it should be. I know that the DMG wanted cursed items to not be good. What we're seeing with the items here isn't really a true flaw, but a philosophy about cursed items. The DMG is largely intending these to be snuck into a pile of loot, so the players hand them out, only noticing the benefits they're getting from them, and then when they get hit with the curse, prompting an amusing gotcha moment, and if it's a low-level party, likely forcing them to go on a quest or find a powerful wizard or some other way of getting the curse lifted. Overall, this isn't a bad thing. It's a little adventure in the midst of your campaign, punishing your party for their loot-hungry greed, and off they go. Or if they know it's cursed, they carry it around for a while, pawning it off on an unsuspecting merchant or somehow using it to curse an enemy. This is all fine and good, and the problem isn't with this concept, but with the items themselves. I'd recommend making your own cursed magic items, ones that better fit the story and your world to maximize the impact that these moments have. Created cursed items should fall into essentially two categories. First, items that have both a boon and a drawback, and a player chooses it to carry with them all through the story because they find the benefits useful and the drawback interesting. Should really be more of an RP decision than a statistical one, but statistics are going to be a part of it. This is what makes the Shield of Mistral attraction an interesting cursed magic item. It has a downside, and one that could spell disaster depending on how the dice fall. But it also has a good upside here, and there are plenty of character builds, especially stuff like tanks, that would actually want this item in order to better protect their party members. Or, cursed items should be important to the story as a whole, in which case it will be a burden, but a necessary one, to carry them through the campaign until they can be locked away or destroyed. It's even fine if a cursed object slowly corrupts a character and is something they don't want to part with, but this can be a difficult thing to do during a tabletop game. This is taking a lot of character control out of the hands of the player and giving it to the DM, and not in a good way. It's a much easier thing to do in a book, and tabletop campaigns that get treated like the DM's personal novel don't usually run very well. The concept of a burdensome magic item that the party has to carry with them and deal with works very well, however, and gives rise to good stories. The One Ring is interesting because it is a burden to carry, and if the characters want to save the world, somebody has to carry it to Mordor and cast it into the fire. Putting a D&D group in the same sort of situation forces them to cope with a subtle curse for a long time, without really expecting any benefits from it. It's what the story demands, and it keeps the players moving forward through it because the weight of that item is always there. It's fine if curses are truly debilitating, but there has to be a good reason for it, and it's fine if curses only affect specific individuals, characters of a certain alignment, or anyone who isn't the true wielder of a magic item. But in most of these cases, it should be tied into the story itself, and not just existing for the sake of having a cursed item. The cursed sword that burns the hand of anyone righteous who picks it up is more interesting if it's tied into the story and the world at large, and gives rise to interesting reveals should a supposed ally pick it up and not get burned, or if a player character has a slow descent further into moral decrepitude. In the first D&D campaign that I ran, there was a broken sword called Wraithbane, which counted as a magical weapon but didn't do any extra damage. What it did do was make the wielder immune to spells or spell-like effects that didn't use a spell attack roll or AoEs, especially stuff like mind-altering spells or even power word kill. But for each level of the spell, the wielder took a certain amount of fire damage as the blade absorbed the effect. This meant that high-level spells still did a lot of damage to the target, but it didn't have its intended effect. The players literally refused to get rid of it all through the campaign. They were taking a lot of fire damage all told, but they felt like the benefit outweighed the downside. This may not count as a true cursed magic item, but I think it's close, and it does demonstrate the first of those two philosophies about creating cursed items, giving the player both a benefit and a downside and letting them choose whether it's worth it. The trick is they have to be balanced, and the ones in the DMG, like Armor of Vulnerability, aren't really. Cursed items should be treated more like Savage Worlds' Edges and Hindrances system. You can get away with giving your players really powerful items and effects if you give a downside or two. And if the downsides are either goofy or cool, the players will actually want to use the cursed items you've given them. For example, in Divinity Original Sin 2, which we've been playing a bunch of recently, there's an early game armor set that's really very powerful for a strength-based character, and it's hard to find all the different pieces. On top of this, the Tyrant set has a couple of different curses on it. A lot, in fact. Each piece of the set gives a bad status effect to the character wearing it, from crippling them to literally setting them on fire. If you wear every piece of the set, however, you lose all these negative effects. On top of this, it gives access to a spell ability that's needed to progress through the early game, but is relatively rare and only found on a handful of items. If you use this ability too many times through the armor, however, it summons the Tyrant himself, and you get a nice little mini boss fight against the owner of the armor. All told, this is a wonderful combination. Not only do you get to hear a fawn say, I've been cursed 4 or 5 times as you put it on him, but it's a good set of armor, and the moment that the owner of the armor appears to fight you is a wonderful reveal. On top of that, if anything in the game forces you to unequip a piece of the armor, such as joining a blindfolded arena fight, every one of those curses comes flooding back. It's a risk-reward balance, and most of the time, the risk is pretty minimal. You can wear the armor through a dozen fights without any trouble, but as soon as something happens to trigger one of the armor's curses, it's instantly clear what happened, and it's honestly an amusing moment. Cursed items should be a mix like this. Not really crippling most of the time, perhaps not even a drawback at all, but when triggered, it's unmistakable. Another thing you can do is force characters to use cursed items for specific encounters or single puzzles. Put the characters in a dungeon where they have to use a set of armor that gives immunity to fire damage, but vulnerability to all other damage types, in order to cross a room of fire to get something from the other side. It doesn't matter in this case that the curse is debilitating or uninteresting, because they're not expected to carry it around with them and not expected to wear it all through the campaign. Cursed magic items should be a little more common than they are, and their effects should be more varied. They are vessels for storytelling in RP, whether they're a story-driven weight that must be carried or an optional tool that comes with some downsides. Make magic items that are interesting and unique, and you won't have to try and force your party to use them. They'll do so willingly.
Well, that has been our video about the cursed items in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, both kind of the problems with the existing ones, as well as some ideas on making better ones for your own worlds and your own games. If you like this type of stuff, you should check out our Help Action series, which is a much more technical breakdown of concepts in 5th editions, really getting into kind of nitty-gritty on how certain rules and certain interactions work, as well as our bonus action podcast series, which is a much more kind of free-form and less formal discussion of storytelling and tabletop RPG mechanics and just how to run games a little better. Now, go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities.